All right, great. Thanks everybody for joining today. Very excited to welcome you to Antenna's State of Subscription webinar for Q1 2026. And we're focused this time on the premium streaming category. Quick introductions. I am Jonathan Carson, co-founder of Antenna, joined today by Brendan Brady, our Director of Strategy, and Brooke Kilker is our Manager of Insights. For those who might be new to Antenna, just a little bit about what we do. So Antenna is a data and analytics company focused on measuring the subscription space with a special focus on the video streaming category. We study transaction data from about 2 million Americans, and we use that data to understand the services that people are signing up for and canceling to produce all the great insights that we're going to go through today. You're also going to get a nice sneak peek at our newest solution, which incorporates viewership data into that analysis, so we can understand after people sign up what shows they actually watch on those services. Okay, let's talk about the premium streaming marketplace. So premium streamers, that's what we call the 10 biggest services in the market. For the past couple of years, we've been really talking about the maturation of this streaming category. And what comes with that is lower growth, but also more stability. And we're going to see that in the data that we look through today. There's another thing that we wanted to call out, though, which is a really interesting paradox in the consumer behavior that we see in the category. As churn is settling down as part of this more stable marketplace, we see streamers actually executing a number of different initiatives that you would think would be hurting churn. So they're raising prices, they're reducing marketing budgets, they're making fewer shows, and the phenomenon that we're going to really focus on today, they're concentrating their acquisition efforts on fewer, bigger moments. So big sports events, big show premieres, big price promotions, and in general, a big Q4 season, which has almost become a parallel to the traditional broadcast concept of the new fall season. And you'd think if you're getting a lot of people signing up for these big splashy events, they might be less loyal, and which would make churn rise. But to the contrary, we don't see that impact at all. So we're going to dig into what's going on with those big moments. And we're going to look at some of the smart tactics that streamers are using to manage retention in this new world. All right. So as I said, premium streamers continued to mature in 2025. And as part of that, growth is slowing down. Still robust. We saw an estimate of 7% growth in subscribers for the year 2025 amongst these services. But that's down from what we measured as 12% in 2024. So the first time that we've seen an overall subscription growth in the single digits. Within that, the share shift was quite mild. So Disney Plus, HBO Max, and Apple TV are the ones that we saw gaining share within the group. But those were all pretty modest gains. Now, since mid-2024, we've been talking to you all about the fact that we see churn rates starting to stabilize. So average monthly churn for the category kind of hovers in the 4 to 5% range most months. Netflix has always been setting the pace at 2% or even lower. We did see that big pop in churn starting in September of 25, fueled by the Jimmy Kimmel controversy. That really settled down within a couple months and was back down to normal by December. So overall, kind of big change from what we saw in those so-called streaming war years when churn every quarter was up and to the right as a category. That's really stopped. Churn rates have really settled down for the past year and a half. And to visualize this, we think this chart really brings that concept to life. So this is essentially the year-over-year difference in monthly churn for premium SVOD compared to the same month in the prior year. So for example, if we're looking at the first red bar all the way on the far left, what's that saying is that January 2023 churn was about 0.6 percentage points higher than it was for the category in January of 2022. So between Jan 22 and Jan 23, churn was up, right? So, okay, if we look at this in total, we see between January 23 and the end of Q3 in 24, category churn compared to the same month in the prior year, it was up 19 out of 21 months. And not just small increases. These were, over half a percentage point in many months. That's a lot of additional cancellations. So early in 2024, those increases start to moderate. And you see that the size of the red bar gets a lot smaller. And then all of a sudden in Q4 of 24, it's like a switch was flipped. And 7 of 11 months after that were flat or down versus prior year. Okay, so big change in the market in driving towards this stability that we've been talking about. The other thing that we noticed is a big focus on driving acquisition around big moments. And so we're going to look at that from a couple different angles. This first one is looking at daily signups for premium SVOD services over the past 3 years. And we're seeing what percentage of all their entire year signups came on just the 10 biggest acquisition days. Okay. So the 10 days that drove the most signups, what percentage of all signups were they in that year? And the numbers are substantial across all streamers, especially ones that have big sports moments. So Peacock sets the pace. In 2024, almost 1 in 4 signups for Peacock came on those top 10 days in 2024. They had the Paris Summer Olympics. They had 2 exclusive NFL games. Paramount was at 15%. They had the Super Bowl that year. Interestingly, for 2025, it was actually HBO Max who was our big day leader. And that was really on the back of a very big Black Friday promotion. Okay, so when do all of those big sign-up moments occur? Increasingly, it's in Q4. So it's almost this twist on the new fall season idea that we saw so prevalent in broadcast television days. Certainly, the Q4 timing is partially due to the NFL. And to holiday promotions. But in general, we see this concentration of acquisition coming in that last quarter of the year. And so in 2025, Antenna estimates 31% of gross ads came in Q4. The next biggest quarter was Q1 at only 24%, so substantially higher. And that's really intensifying. If we compare Q4 of 2023 to 2025, and 25 gross ads were up 30%. So it's growing. It's bigger than any other quarter and also growing faster than any other quarter. Now, finally, Antenna also observes acquisition consolidating around big hit shows. So those who have loyally attended State of Subscriptions webinars in the past, you'll remember in our last installment, we were first introducing data from our new subscriber views service. That's our programming analytics show, or a solution that looks at what shows people watch after signing up. Here, we're looking at that number of new subscribers, people who have signed up for a service in the last 30 days, who watched each of these hit shows in their first 90 days post-premiere. So new show launches, how many brand new subscribers are watching that show in the first 90 days after it premieres. And what do we see? Not surprisingly, a very large number of new subs are coming in around these hit shows. Landman on Paramount Plus really sets the pace. Antenna estimates almost 3 million new Paramount subscribers watched Landman in the 90 days after premiere. Love Island was fastest out of the gate last summer. We estimate almost 1.5 million new subs watched it in its first 30 days after premiere. Severance, not surprisingly, big acquisition driver for Apple TV. Okay, so acquisition is really driven in these concentrated waves around big moments. And as I said up front, you might hypothesize that makes it hard for streamers to keep those people around, because after they finish their game, after their promotion ends, after they finish the show, you would think maybe they're going to churn and move on to another service. And yet we see churn meaningfully settling down. So what are the streamers actually doing to manage retention? To dive in, I'll pass over to Brooke.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Today, we're going to go over 4 different tactics on what streamers are doing to manage retention. And the first one is driving winbacks. So there's a saying that we have at Antenna, and it's, if they churn, they will return. And what we're looking at here is Antenna's win-back curve, and that helps put a number on that. So over 40% of canceled subscribers return within 12 months after canceling, which is about 4 in 10 subscribers. The dotted line that you see on this graph is the weighted average, landing at 42%. And from there, you can see that Netflix leads the pack at 50% of their subscribers returning in 12 months after canceling. But Hulu and HBO Max are not that far behind it at 44%. What this means is the win-back opportunity and win-back strategy is very real, and it's important as we're in this era of streaming where churn is settling down. So for streamers, this might mean that your churn modeling should be accounting for returning subscribers. If they're not actually leaving, they might be just pausing their service. And this trend continues to accelerate. So this numbers back up the previous slide. And what we're looking at here is gross adds across the premium SVOD services from 2023 to 2025. It's broken out by resubscribers and new subscribers. And what you can see is that in 2025, more than half of gross adds to Paramount Plus and Peacock were resubscribers. And this is up almost 20 points since 2023. Even more so, all 7 of these services are seeing an increase in their resubscribers over time. So what this means is that win-backs are increasingly important to keep in mind for your streaming strategy and your acquisition strategy. Of course, we cannot talk about what streamers are doing to manage retention without talking about bundles. Antenna actually added coverage of 22 new bundles in 2025 just to show that bundles are definitely still being added and they're not going anywhere. And this varies from super big ones like the Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Unlimited bundle to also more niche ones like Starz and ViX Premium, and then A&E Crime Central and Lifetime Movie Club. I think this shows that the market is really moving past the experimentation phase of bundles, and now bundles are being a core part of distribution strategy with this many new entrants in 2025. And the numbers really reflect this trend as well. What we're looking at subscriptions broken out by bundles from 2023 to 2025. And what we can see from this is that bundled subscriptions actually grew 50% year over year, landing at around 71 million at the end of Q4, while non-bundled subscriptions actually declined about 1%. Bundles are now representing 27%, or about a third of total subscriptions, and that's a 13-point increase from 14% of total subscriptions in 2023. What this is showing is that a lot of this incremental growth is coming from bundles, which is why we think that we can expect to see more and more bundles in 2026. And part of the reason why these bundles are so popular is because they drive such strong loyalty. At Antenna, we love this example of Disney and HBO Max bundle. And what we're looking at here is the 12-month survival rate of those subscribers after they sign up. The dark purple line at the very top is showing that 59% of Disney, Hulu, and HBO Max bundled subscribers are still subscribed 12 months after signing up, which is even higher than Netflix's standalone at 55%. And furthermore, significantly higher than the standalone counterparts of that bundle. So that's those dotted lines at the bottom where we see Disney Plus, HBO Max, and Hulu in around 30%. I think that really shows that when you have the right bundle services together, the retention can really be exemplified. And that bundle launched in 2024. To highlight a bundle that launched in 2025, it was super exciting to watch the Apple TV and Peacock bundle launch on October 19th. And in just basically 3 months, they've been able to hit nearly 700,000 signups. So I think if we could pull this graph even forward a bit, it'd be really exciting to see how this bundle performs, especially after Peacock's really strong February with the Super Bowl and the Olympics, and of course, Apple TV's Pluribus and Shrinking that just launched. So it shows that even that new bundles that are still launching, they can still quickly gain traction when it's a great combination of services. Our third tactic is optimizing promotional offers, and I'm sure even you guys as an audience have felt this one. And the first trend that we call out is that services are decreasing their reliance on free trials. What we're looking at here is signups broken out by paid and free trials over the past 3 years for a couple of premium services. And what you can see is pretty much across the board, especially with HBO Max and Hulu, is that free trial signups are declining. Paramount also recently announced in January 2026 that they were no longer going to offer free trials on their direct distribution, just going to show that this trend is happening across the board. And I think what this suggests is that the industry has learned that subscribers are still sticking around from day one with a paid subscription, and the trials are now no longer being relied on as often. And finally, our last example is a great one for Black Friday promotions. Jonathan talked earlier about how important it is for acquisition, but it's also a really strong retention tool for premium SVODs. Services in 2024 offered extended discounts up to a year. Disney and Hulu both offered in 2024 for Black Friday, and HBO Max offered 6 months promotions. What we're looking at here is their survival 12 months after they signed up via that promotion. And what's really striking is 12 months later, these Black Friday promotion signups survived just as well as their 2024 overall counterpart who didn't sign up with a promotion. So what we can see is that services are using these longer discount windows in order to help retain their subscribers over time. And what exemplifies that is in 2025, HBO Max actually extended their discount from 6 months to 12 months. And as Jonathan pointed out, Black Friday, they had a successful Black Friday because of it. Next, I will hand it over to Brendan to walk through our fourth and final tactic.
Awesome. Thank you, Brooke. So for years, Antenna has been in market measuring what people buy. So that allowed us to report on the number of subscribers to a given service or to report on things like churn. What we never really knew was what was going on within the four walls of that platform. What were people watching? Now, like Jonathan said at the top of the call, we've integrated viewership data alongside our purchase data. And what this allows us to do is now not only see those purchase actions, but also see what people are watching and how those two things can relate to one another. One of the areas we think will be rich with insight is around scheduling. If we look at the traditional pay TV model, there are pretty well-established tactics for, scheduling a a night of programming. These are mostly oriented around hours, and it's kind of like that primetime block. In the streaming world, we're now programming for months at a time, quarters at a time, and years at a time. And we think this data can be foundational in helping to establish those best practices or learning from peers around how some scheduling tactics then ultimately can impact the subscriber base. So for here, we clicked into a handful of different analyses. This first one deals with Taylor Sheridan on Paramount Plus. Of course, a prolific creator. And in fact, Paramount ran from September 24 to April 25, an 8-month block where 4 Taylor Sheridan series aired consecutively, one after the other. What this analysis deals with is looking at the sign-up segments who came in for each of these shows. And what we're looking at is how did they proliferate within Paramount Plus after the show that they signed up for concluded. And so you'll notice with Tulsa King, right? What that is saying is that 96% of that acquisition cohort that finished Tulsa King attached to that next Taylor Sheridan program. For Landman, it was 80% of that acquisition segment attaching to the next Taylor Sheridan program. If we move over to the furthest right point of the chart, you'll see that for 1923, 45% of that acquisition segment attached to the next Taylor Sheridan programming or just other Taylor Sheridan programming in general. And I think that one is particularly notable because that was kind of that last series, 1923, in that 8-month stretch of Taylor Sheridan being always on. Moving over to Amazon Prime Video, of course, Thursday Night Football is huge and has a huge audience, and the NFL remains widely watched. In this analysis, we looked at the signups who came in to Amazon Prime at the start of the football season and tuned into that first Commanders versus Packers game. So that's our cohort here. And then we're looking week over week. How did that audience of the specific people who signed up and tuned into the first game, how did that audience come back each week? And you'll see it was shy of half each week. Let's call it between 38 and 50%. It peaked for Eagles versus Giants, a rivalry game, in terms of those signups who watched that first game coming back week over week. Other things we'll be able to do with this data is looking at, for example, how did these folks attach or relate to the general entertainment programming on Prime? And how does that compare to football audiences on other platforms such as Paramount Plus or Peacock or ESPN? This is kind of just that baseline example of showing the capability of how something like Thursday Night Football rights can help drive that habit with the service. Next, we also clicked in on The Pitt. Of course, the Emmy-winning Outstanding Drama Series last year, unique in that it was 15 episodes, more akin to like a broadcast show from a scheduling perspective. And so we thought this was particularly notable to click in on. And so in this analysis, we looked at signups who viewed The Pitt. So it's almost like that acquisition segment for The Pitt. This is going back to season 1 because, of course, retention takes time to play out. So we looked at the signups who came in for The Pitt. And now we're looking, how were they retained on HBO Max, and how does that compare to a benchmark? This looks and feels like a survival curve that Antenna would report on for years. The difference here, and it's quite a positive difference, is now it works in the eyeball behavior or that engagement behavior. And so to establish that Pitt cohort, you have to sign up to Max and you have to watch The Pitt. So that's our acquisition segment, and then we have the benchmark. And what you'll see is, and perhaps driven by that 15-episode run, you can see that there's better loyalty for the group that came in for The Pitt versus the benchmark. And notably, that loyalty edge remains even beyond The Pitt's finale from that month 4 to month 5 window. And then we might say, well, what kind of drove after that finale? What did they kind of attach to? Or what was that next Max show that they caught? And so here we're looking at that acquisition segment and we're looking at what did they watch right after The Pitt ended, right? And I want to call attention to Hacks, the 4th ranked show on this list. The way to interpret this is that of that acquisition segment for the pit, 20% of that specific group tuned into hacks. That was a 2.9 times segment index, meaning that the group, the pit acquisition segment that tuned into hacks, was about 3 times more likely to watch hacks than the average HBO Max subscriber. And of course, hacks was that Max original right after the pit. And so that can play a large role in kind of driving that positive delta for loyalty, even post-finale. And the last thing I'll say here is we also think it's notable that, Hacks wasn't the most watched show for this group. And we still saw that loyalty benefit. And so it's not like their appetite had to shift to be totally HBO Max. With just Hacks and Duster popping up, that can play a role in that loyalty benefit. But ultimately, the greatest reaching show for this segment in this window was the 4 Seasons on Netflix. And I believe that about...
Great.
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan, and close this out.
Yeah, just to wrap up, thanks everybody for joining. Just a reminder, go check out our website, antenna.live, antenna.live, and you can download the paper version of this report. You can reach out to us for follow-up sessions or sign up for our newsletter, The Signal. Thanks, everybody.